All right, we are just past 8 o'clock. The ads on Twitch are done. So, let's settle in. Let's get comfortable. Grab a drink, pull up a chair, and it's time to get back to definitely not detention, but it's time to read the dictionary once again. The Devil's Dictionary. Welcome back. This is, honestly, I've long lost count, but it's the umpteenth day of reading from Ambrose Bierce's The Devil's Dictionary, a quaint, cynical, satirical collection of sort of a proto-satirical comic that was published in the early 1900s of a collection of tongue-in-cheek definitions, poking fun at general human condition, the politics of the time, and just in general being something of a fun little romp. So, this has been a fun little diversion for us in the past. So let's continue and see if it still holds up as we go on. Last time we finished our reading of Dante's Inferno, and this is actually very fitting. We're going from dancing with the devil in the depths of the pit to taking a leaflet out of his dictionary. This is a little bit more, well, actually, I won't even say it's a little bit more serious, or a little more spurious, because really, Dante's Inferno was poking fun at political figures and such just a couple hundred years earlier. So, maybe it's not really all that different after all. Maybe satire and such carry on through the ages. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just reading too much into it and this is just a fun little diversion. A little bit of A, a little bit of B. Alright. So, we don't really have too much of a quota on this tonight. I think we've got probably another 2 sessions of this so far to be able to get through. So, not too much, not too fuss. And this is our filler anyway. Yeah, my week's been good so far. It is only Tuesday, and generally, mine start off pretty easily. Our Mondays are usually okay, as you expect Mondays to be, and then Tuesdays are mostly filled with meetings at work, so it's not a whole lot of actual work is done. And that's kind of nice, isn't it? How about you guys? Anything going on? Anything crazy to report to the group? I know we've just started. It is Pride Week, or Pride Month, I should say. So for those of you who are observing or presenting your own pride, congratulations. Know you've got friends all over. Those of us who are as vanilla gets, we're still in your corner. So that's a month of this. I try not to be too performative about it because it's really one of those things that people need support year round, catching not even strays, but just direct sniper fire from all sides. They do not need this shit. So, Pride is nice. Pride is great. But it's not just a month thing. Allies are allies all the time, and people who are disenfranchised and such are as such all the time as well. So yeah. Oh, great. Art is always fun. It's a skill that I've never really taken the time to develop. I can write a little bit, but I've never really taken the time and effort to develop the artistic side. Something I admire greatly. It's just hard to find the time, And I know it's not all talent. There's so much of it is. Who are you? Two Weebus? No. How did you get out of here with? You should have been caught by the Autobot. What the hell? But yeah, I always think that when people are like putting on or calling up artists as being oh so talented, it almost feels insulting. Because it's not just talent, it's time, effort, and skills that have been cultivated through oftentimes years of continued effort and determination. And just boiling it down to talent is just rude. Just rude. So, artists are to be admired, and the effort they've put in are to be admired. I, for one, have not been able to put in, and haven't found the time and energy to put in that effort. But those that can have my sincerest respect. And I think we're far enough in the stream that it is safe to let loose the dogs of profanity, and shall we say, fuck AI. The Gen AI shit? No. That ain't art. That's some slop. Leave it to people. Alright, so, it's been a nice little pre-reading chat. We don't do these very often, so thanks for spurring us along, Star. It was nice to see you playing Subnautica the other day. We don't often get to spread the love back and forth. My raids usually go toward other readers, but I love to keep it in the community whenever we can. So it was a rare treat, and I hope you had a lot of fun when you were playing. So, with that preamble through a little bit of chat, Simba has joined us, as is tradition. Little man wants to take up half the desk. Let's go ahead and shift over to our reading nook, and we can get back into the realm of the Devil's Dictionary with Ambrose Bierce. And tonight we are picking back up from the letter S. Almost feels like the opening of a episode of the Sesame Street as we go into these. All right. The letter S. Sabbath. Noun. A weekly festival having its origin in the fact that God made the world in 6 days, and was arrested on the 7th. Among the Jews, observance of the day was enforced by commandment, of which this is the Christian version. Remember the 7th day to make thy neighbor keep it holy. To the Creator, it seemed fit and expedient that the Sabbath should be the last day of the week. But the early fathers of the Church held other views. So great is the sanctity of the day that even where the Lord holds a doubtful and precarious jurisdiction over those who go down to and down into the sea, it is reverently recognized, as is manifest in the following deep water version of the 4th commandment. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thou art able, and on the 7th wholly stone the deck and scrape the cable. Decks are no longer wholly stoned, but the cable still supplies the captain with opportunity to attest a pious respect for the divine ordinance. Sacerdotalist. Noun. One who holds the belief that a clergyman is a priest. Denial of this momentous doctrine is the hardest challenge that is now flung into the teeth of the Episcopalian Church by the neo-dictionarians. Sacrament. Noun. A solemn religious ceremony to which several degrees of authority and significance are attached. Rome has 7 sacraments, but the Protestant churches, being less prosperous, feel that they can afford only 2, and these of inferior sanctity. Some of the smaller sects have no sacraments at all, for which mean economy they will indubitably be damned. Sacred. Adjective. Dedicated to some religious purpose, having a divine character, inspiring solemn thoughts or emotions, as the Dalai Lama of Tibet, the Mugam of Mbongo, the Temple of Apes in Ceylon, the cow in India, the crocodile, the cat, and the onion of ancient Egypt, the mufti of Mush, the hair of the dog that bit Noah, etc. Took a bit of a left turn there at the end. All things are either sacred or profane, the former to Ecclesiast being bring gain, the latter to the devil appertain. Dumbo omundro. Sandlotter. Noun. A vertebrate animal holding the political views of Dennis Kearney, a notorious demagogue of San Francisco whose audiences gathered in the open spaces, sandlots, of the town. True to the traditions of his species, this leader of the proletariat was finally bought off by his law and order enemies, living prosperously silent and dying impenitently rich. But before his treason he imposed upon California a constitution that was a confection of sin, an addiction of solecisms. The similarity between the words sandlotter and sansculotte is problematically significant, but indubitably suggestive. Safety clutch. Noun. A mechanical device acting automatically to prevent the fall of an elevator or cage in case of an accident to the hoisting apparatus. Once I seen a human ruin in an elevator well, and his members was bestrewing all the place where he'd fill. And I says, apostrophizing the uncommon woeful wreck, your position's so surprising that I tremble for your neck. Then that ruin, smiling sadly and impressive, up and spoke, well, I wouldn't tremble badly, for it's been a fortnight broke. Then, for further comprehension of his attitude, he begs, I will focus my attention on his various arms and legs, how they all are contumacious, where they reach respective lie, how one trotter proves ungracious, to other one an alibi. These particulars is mentioned for to show his dismal state, which I wasn't first intentioned to specifical relate. None is worser to be dreaded than I ever have heard tell, than the gents who there was spreaded in that elevator wheel. Now, this tale is allegoric, it is figurative all, for the whale is metaphoric, and the feller didn't fall. I opine it isn't moral for a right man to cheat, and despise to wear a laurel, as was gotten by deceit. For 'tis politics intended by the elevator mind, it will boost a person splendid, if his talent is the kind. Colonel Bryan had the talent, for the busted man is him, and it shot him up right and gallant, till his head begun to swim. Then the rope it broke above him, and he painful come to earth, where there's nobody to love him for his detrimented worth. Though he's living, none would know him, or at leastwise not as such. Moral of this woeful poem, frequent oil your safety clutch. Porter Poog. I rather hope that I don't get stuck in that little bastardized accent as we continue. That is one that's got surprising tenacity. Saint. Noun. A dead sinner revised and edited. The Duchess of Orleans relates that the irreverent old calumniator, Marshal Villeroy, who in his youth had known St. Francis de Sales, said on hearing him called saint, I am delighted to hear that Monsieur de Sales is a saint. He was fond of saying indelicate things and used to cheat at cards. In other respects, he was a perfect gentleman, though a fool. Salacity. Noun. A certain literary quality, frequently observed in popular novels, especially in those written by women and young girls, who give it another name and think that in introducing it they are occupying a neglected field of letters and reaping an overlooked harvest. If they have the misfortune to live long enough, they are tormented with a desire to burn their sheaves. So, this is the dark history where the teenagers are writing things that are rather suspect. And if they're discovered when you're an adult, produce all sorts of shame. Salamander, noun. Originally a reptile, inhabiting fire. Later an anthropomorphous immortal, but still a pyrophile. Salamanders are now believed to be extinct, the last one of which we have an account having been seen in Carcassonne by the Abbé Belloc, who exorcised it with a bucket of holy water. Sarcophagus. Yeah, we've all had a phase or two that we're now embarrassed by. Mine was when I decided to become a VTuber. Sarcophagus, noun. Among the Greeks, a coffin, which being made of a certain kind of carnivorous stone, had the peculiar property of devouring the body placed in it. The sarcophagus known to modern obsequiographers is commonly a product of the carpenter's art. That is also very valid. You just embrace the cringe. Cringe but free, you might even say. Or alternatively, you could have no sense of shame, in which case nothing is cringe because you don't even know how to cringe. Those are otherwise known as theater kids. Satan, noun. One of the Creator's lamentable mistakes, represented in sackcloth and axes, being installed as an archangel. Satan made himself multifariously objectionable, and was finally expelled from heaven. Halfway in his descent he paused, bent his head in thought a moment, and at last went back. "There is one favor that I should like to ask," said he. "Name it." "Man, I understand, is about to be created. He will need laws." "What, you wretch! You, his appointed adversary, charged from the dawn of eternity with hatred of his soul, you ask for the right to make his laws?" "Oh, pardon. What I have to ask is that he be permitted to make them himself." "It was so ordered." Okay, I kind of like that. Well done, Satan. Well done. You won in the end. Satiety, noun. The feeling that one has for the plate after he has eaten its contents, madam. Satire, noun. An obsolete kind of literary composition in which the vices and follies of the author's enemies were expounded with imperfect tenderness. In this country, satire never had more than a sickly and uncertain existence, for the soul of it is wit, wherein we are dolefully deficient. The humor that we mistake for it, like all humor, being tolerant and sympathetic. Moreover, although Americans are endowed by their Creator with abundant vice and folly, it is not generally known that these are reprehensible qualities. Wherefore the satirist is popularly regarded as a sour-spirited knave, and his ever-victim's outcry for co-defendants evokes a national assent. Hail, satire, by thy praises ever sung, in the dead language of a mummy's tongue, for thou thyself art dead, and damned as well, thy spirit usefully employed in hell, had it been such as consecrates the Bible, thou hadst not perished by the law of libel. Barney Stims. Satyr, noun. One of the few characters of the Grecian mythology accorded recognition in the Hebrew. Leviticus 17:7. The satyr was at first a member of the dissolute community acknowledging a loose allegiance with Dionysus, but underwent many transformations and improvements. Not infrequently he is confounded with the faun, a latter and dissenter creation of the Romans, who was less like a man and more like a goat. Sauce, noun. the one infallible sign of civilization and enlightenment. A people with no sauces has 1,000 vices. A people with one sauce has only 999. For every sauce invented and accepted, a vice is renounced and forgiven. I'm not sure if that's the sauce that I was first thinking that he was going to go there with that. Saw, noun. A trite, popular saying, or proverb, figurative and colloquial, so called because it makes its way into a wooden head. Following are examples of old saws fitted with new teeth. A penny saved is a penny to squander. A man is known by the company that he organizes. A bad workman quarrels with the man who calls him that. A bird in the hand is worth what it will bring. Better late than before anybody has invited you. Example is the better than following it. Half is better than a whole one, if there is much else. Think twice before you speak to a friend in need. What is worth doing is worth the trouble of asking somebody to do it. Least said is soonest disavowed. He laughs best who laughs least. Speak of the devil, and he will hear about it. Of two equals, choose to be the least. Strike while your employer has a big contract. Where there's a will, there's a won't. Okay, I actually liked the twisting of most of those sentences. Most of them you can recognize, because they're relatively timeless, but the bastardization of those sayings is clever, to say the least. Oh, and we are finally out of the S.A. There's a lot of S. It is one of the most populous letters. Alright, Scarabaeus, noun. The sacred beetle of the ancient Egyptians, allied to our familiar tumblebug. It was supposed to symbolize immortality, the fact that God knew why, giving its peculiar sanctity. Its habit of incubating its eggs in a ball of ordure may have also commended it to the favor of the priesthood, and may someday assure it an equal reverence among ourselves. True, the American beetle is an inferior beetle, but the American priest is an inferior priest. Yeah, periodically, Ambrose just gets me out of left field, and I can't stop myself. Some of these are very good. Scarabee, noun. The same as Scarabaeus. He fell by his own hand beneath the great oak tree. He'd travelled in a foreign land. He tried to make her understand the dance that's called the saraband, but he called it Scarabee. He had called it so through an afternoon, and she, delight of his harem, if so might be, had smiled and said naught. Oh, the body was fair to see, all frosted there in the shine of the moon. Dead for a Scarabee, and a recollection that came too late. Oh, fate! They buried him where he lay. He sleeps awaiting the day in state, and two possible puns, moon-eyed and wan. Gloom over the grave, and then move on. Dead for a Scarabee. Fernando Temple. Scarification, noun. A form of penance practiced by the medieval pious. The rite was performed, sometimes with a knife, sometimes with a hot iron, but always, says Arsenius Asceticus, acceptably, if the penitent spared himself no pain nor harmless disfigurement. Scarification, with other crude penances, has now been superseded by benefaction. The founding of a library or endowment of a university is said to yield to the penitent a sharper and more lasting pain than is conferred by the knife or iron, and is therefore a super means of grace. There are, however, two grave objections to it as a penitential method, the good that it does, and the attaint of justice. Also, let it be known that there's a resurgence of scarification in the form of teenagers who cut. That might be a little too close to the bone there. Scepter, noun. A king's staff of office, the sign and symbol of his authority. It was originally a mace with which the sovereign admonished his jester and vetoed ministerial measures by breaking the bones of their proponents. Scimitar, noun. A curved sword of exceeding keenness, in the conduct of which certain Orientals attain a surprising proficiency, as the incident here related will serve to show. The account is translated from the Japanese Shusi Itama, a famous writer of the 13th century. When the first Gichikukutai... Okay, hang on. If this is Japanese, how the hell are you getting a kutai sound? That just doesn't work. That's... Ambrose, are you confused? When the great Gichikukutai was Mikado, he condemned to decapitation Jijijiri, a high officer of court. Soon after the hour appointed for performance of the rite, what was his Majesty's surprise to see, calmly approaching the throne, the man who should have been at that time 10 minutes dead. 1,700 impossible dragons! Shouted the enraged monarch. Did I not sentence you to stand in the marketplace and have your head struck off by the public executioner at 3 o'clock? And is it now not 3:10? O son of 1,000 illustrious deities, answered the condemned minister, all that you say is so true that the truth is a lie in comparison. But your heavenly majesty's sunny and vitalizing wishes have been pestilently disregarded. With joy, I ran and placed my unworthy body in the marketplace. The executioner appeared with his bare scimitar, ostentatiously whirled it in the air, and then, tapping me lightly upon the neck, strode away, pelted by the populace, with whom I was ever a favourite. I am come to pray for justice upon his own dishonourable and treasonous head. Yeah, it's just European for cool curved sword. To what regiment of executioners does the black-bowled caitiff belong? Asked the Mikado. To the gallant 9837th. I know the man. His name is Sako Samshi. Let him be brought before me, said the Mikado to an attendant, and half hour later the culprit stood in the presence. Thou bastard, son of a three-legged hunchback without thumbs, roared the sovereign. Why didst thou but lightly tap the neck that it should have been thy pleasure to sever? Lord of cranes and cherry blossoms, replied the executioner, unmoved. Command him to blow his nose with his fingers. Being commanded, Jijijiri laid hold of his nose and trumpeted like an elephant, all expecting to see the severed head flung violently from him. Nothing occurred. The performance prospered peacefully to the close, without incident. All eyes were now turned on the executioner, who had grown as white as the snows on the summit of Fujiyama. His legs trembled, and his breath came in gasps of terror. Several kinds of spike-tailed brass lions, he cried. I am a ruined and disgraced swordsman. I struck the villain feebly because in flourishing the scimitar I had accidentally passed it through my own neck. Father of the moon, I resign my office. So saying, he grasped his topknot, lifted off his head, and advancing to the throne laid it humbly at the Mikado's feet. Not the direction I was expecting that little vignette to go. And yes, obviously, he's just sort of making up these things in a way that would please the audience. If you don't know any better at all, it might fit. Scrapbook. Noun. A book that is commonly edited by a fool. Many persons of some small distinction compile scrapbooks containing whatever they happen to read about themselves or employ others to collect. One of these egotists was addressed in the lines following by Agamemnon Melanchthon Peters. Dear Frank, that scrapbook where you boast you keep a record true of every kind of peppered roast that's made of you, wherein you paste the printed jibes that revel round your name, thinking the laughter of the scribes attests your fame. Where all the pictures you arrange that comic pencils trace, your funny figure and your strange Semitic face. Excuse me? Pray lend it to me, which I have not, nor aught, but there I'll list the daily drubbings you'd have got, had God a fist. Scribbler. Noun. A professional writer whose views are antagonistic to one's own. Scriptures. Noun. The sacred books of our holy religion, as distinguished from the false and profane writings on which all other faiths are based. Seal. Noun. A mark impressed upon certain kinds of documents to attest their authenticity and authority. Sometimes it is stamped upon wax and attached to the paper, sometimes into the paper itself. Sealing, in this sense, is a survival of an ancient custom of inscribing important papers with cabalistic words or signs to give them a magical efficacy, independent of the authority that they represent. In the British Museum are preserved many ancient papers, mostly of this sacerdotal character, validated by necromantic pentagrams and other devices. Frequently, initial letters of words to conjure with, and in many instances these are attached in the same way that seals are appended now. As nearly every reasonless and apparently meaningless custom, rite or observance of modern times had origin in some remote utility. It is pleasing to note an example of ancient nonsense evolving in the process of ages into something really useful. Our word sincere is derived from sinecero, without wax. But the learned are not in agreement as to whether this refers to the absence of the cabalistic signs or to that of the wax with which letters were formerly closed from public scrutiny. Either view of the matter will serve one in immediate need of an hypothesis. The initials LS, commonly appended to signatures of legal documents, mean locum sigillis, the place of the seal, although the seal is no longer used. An admirable example of conservatism distinguishing man from the beasts that perish. The words locum sigillis are humbly suggested as a suitable motto for the Pribilof Islands, whenever they shall take their place as a sovereign state of the American Union. Pribilof Islands? I'm gonna have to look that up because I don't know if this is just Ambrose talking out of his ass again, or oh, okay. Well, they are a group of islands in the... Oh, okay. They're off the coast of Alaska. Okay. I guess are they a territory? Or are they actually part of Alaska? Interesting. Okay. Well, this is one of those rare cases where the seeming gibberish that we get from Ambrose is not. Who'd have thought? Who'd have thunk it? But also, let it be known, they're islands that seals live on, like seals in the ocean. So, extra layer of fun. It's the furred seals like those islands. Alright. Scene. Noun. A kind of net for effecting an involuntary change of environment. For fish, it is made strong and coarse, but women are more easily taken with a singularly delicate fabric weighted with small cut stones. The devil, casting a scene of lace with precious stones 'twas weighted, drew it into the landing place, and its contents calculated. All souls of women were in that sack, a draught miraculous precious, but ere he could throw it across his back, they'd all escaped through the meshes. Baruch de Lopez. Self-esteem. Noun. An erroneous appraisement. Damn, okay. Self-evident. Adjective. Evident to one's self and to nobody else. Selfish. Adjective. Devoid of consideration for the selfishness of others. Senate. Noun. A body of elderly gentlemen charged with high duties and misdemeanors. Okay, so some things really do never actually change. Because, wow, that is, if anything, more true than it's ever been. Well done, Ambrose. You have landed yourself in time immemorial, preaching the gospel truth. Serial. Noun. A literary work, usually a story that is not true, creeping through several issues of a newspaper or magazine. Frequently appended to each installment is a synopsis of preceding chapters, for those who've not read them. But a direr need is a synopsis of succeeding chapters for those who do not intend to read them. A synopsis of the entire work would be still better. The late James F. Bowman was writing a serial tale for a weekly paper in collaboration with a genius whose name has not come down to us. They wrote not jointly but alternately, Bowman supplying the installment for 1 week, his friends for the next, and so on. World without end, they hoped. Unfortunately, they quarreled, and one Monday morning when Bowman read the paper to prepare himself for his task, he found his work cut out for him in a way to surpass and pain him. His collaborator had embarked every character of the narrative on a ship and sunk them all in the deepest part of the Atlantic. Severalty. Noun. Separateness, as lands in severalty, i.e., lands held individually, not in joint ownership. Certain tribes of Indians are believed now to be sufficiently civilized to have in severalty the lands that they have hitherto held as tribal organizations, and could not sell to the whites for wax and beads and potato whiskey. Lo, the poor Indian whose unsuited mind saw death before, hell and the grave behind, whom thrifty settler ne'er besought to stay, his small belongings their appointed prey, whom dispossession with allure and wile persuaded elsewhere every little while, his fire unquenched and his undying worm by land in severalty, charming term, are cooled and killed respectively at last, and he to his new holding anchored fast. Sheriff. Noun. In America, the chief executive officer of a county, whose most characteristic duties in some of the western and southern states are catching and hanging rogues. John Elmer Pettibone Kajee, I wrote of him with little glee, was just as bad as he could be. 'Twas frequently remarked, I swung! The sun has never looked upon so bad a man as neighbor John. A sinner through and through, he had this added fault. It made him mad to know another man was bad. In such a case he thought it right to rise at any hour of night and quench that wicked person's light. Despite the town's entreaties, he would hail him to the nearest tree and leave him swinging wide and free. Or sometimes, if the humor came, a luckless wight's reluctant frame was given to the cheerful flame. While it was turning nice and brown, all unconcerned John met the frown of that austere and righteous town. How sad, his neighbor said, and he, so scornful of the law, should be an Ana, C-H-I-S-T. That is the way that they preferred to utter the abhorrent word, so strong the aversion that it stirred. Resolved, they said, continuing, that Badman John must cease this thing of having his unlawful fling. Now, by these sacred relics, here each man held out a souvenir, got at a lynching yesteryear. By these we swear he shall forsake his ways, nor cause our hearts to ache by sins of rope and torch and stake. We'll tie his red right hand until he'll have small freedom to fulfill the mandates of his lawless will. So in convention then and there, they named him sheriff. The affair was opened, it is said, with prayer. J. Milton Slowlock. Siren. Noun. One of several musical prodigies. Famous for a vain attempt to dissuade Odysseus from a life on the ocean wave. Figuratively, any lady of splendid promise, dissembled purpose, and a disappointing performance. Slang. Noun. The grunt of the human hog. Pignoramus intolerabilis. I like that, wow. With an audible memory. The speech of one who utters with his tongue what he thinks with his ear, and feels the pride of a creator in accomplishing the feat of a parrot. A means, under providence, of setting up as a wit, without a capital of sense. Smithereen. Noun. A fragment, a decomponent part, a remain. The word is used variously, but in the following verse on a noted female reformer who opposed bicycle riding by women because it led them to the devil, it is seen at its best. The wheels go round without a sound, the maiden told high revel, in sinful mood insanely gay. True spinsters spin down the way, from duty to the devil. They laugh, they sing, and ting-a-ling, their bells go all the morning. Their lanterns bright bestar the night, pedestrians a warning. With lifted hands Miss Charlotte stands, good lording, oh my, and oh mying. Her rheumatism forgotten quite, her fat with anger frying. She blocks the path that leads to wrath, Jack Satan's power defying. The wheels go round without a sound, the lights burn red and blue and green. What's this that's found upon the ground? Poor Charlotte Smith's a smithereen. John William Yope. So, funny story, that actually was a big thing that they, around the turn of the 19th century, or the 18th century, into the 1900s, which was the turn of the 20th century into the 1900s. Centuries are weird. Anyway, around that time, a little bit sooner, but bicycles were actually very, very much frowned upon for women, because it was thought that the seat was, too salacious. Yes. I know we're going backward now, but hopefully we're not going that far backward. Yeesh. Sophistry. Noun. The controversial method of an opponent, distinguished from one's own by superior insincerity and fooling. This method is that of the later sophists, a Grecian sect of philosophers who began by teaching wisdom, prudence, science, art, and, in brief, whatever men ought to know, but lost themselves in a maze of quibbles and a fog of words. His bad opponent's facts he sweeps away, and drags his sophistry to light of day. then swears they're pushed to madness who resort to falsehood of so desperate a sort. Not so, like sods upon the dead man's breast, he lies most lightly who the least is pressed. Polydore Smith. Sorcery. Noun. The ancient prototype and forerunner of political influence. It was, however, deemed less respectable and sometimes was punished by torture and death. Augustine Nicholas relates that a poor peasant who had been accused of sorcery was put to the torture to compel a confession. After enduring a few gentle agonies, the suffering simpleton admitted his guilt, but naively asked his tormentors if it were not possible to be a sorcerer without knowing it. Soul. Noun. A spiritual entity concerning which there hath been brave disputation. Plato held that those souls which in a previous state of existence, antedating Athens, had obtained the clearest glimpses of eternal truth, entered into the bodies of persons who became philosophers. Plato himself was a philosopher. The souls that had least contemplated divine truth animated the bodies of usurpers and despots. Dionysus I, who had threatened to decapitate the broad-browed philosopher, was a usurper and a despot. Plato doubtless was not the first to construct a system of philosophy that could be quoted against his enemies. Certainly he was not the last. Concerning the nature of the soul, saith the renowned author of Diversiones Sanctorum, there hath been hardly more argument than that of its place in the body. Mine own belief is that the soul hath her seat in the abdomen, in which faith we may discern and interpret a truth hitherto unintelligible, namely, that the glutton is of all men most devout. He is said in the scripture to make a god of his belly. Why then should he not be pious, having ever his deity with him to freshen his faith? Who so well as he can know the might and majesty that he shrines? Truly and soberly, the soul and the stomach are one divine entity, and such was the belief of Promasius, who nevertheless erred in denying it immortality. It observed that its visible and material substance failed and decayed with the rest of the body after death, but of its immaterial essence he knew nothing. This is what we call the appetite, and it survives the wreck and reek of mortality, to be rewarded or punished in another world, according to what it hath demanded in the flesh. The appetite whose coarse clamouring was for the unwholesome viands of the general market and the public refectory shall be cast into eternal famine, whilst that which firmly, though civilly, insisted on ortolans, caviar, terrapin, anchovies, pâte de foie gras, and all such Christian comestibles, shall flesh its spiritual tooth in the souls of them forever and ever, and wreak its divine thirst upon the immortal parts of the rarest and richest wines ever quaffed here below. Such is my religious faith, though I grieve to confess that neither His Holiness the Pope, nor His Grace the Archbishop of Canterbury, whom I equally and profoundly revere, will assent to its determination. Spooker. Noun. A writer whose imagination concerns itself with supernatural phenomena, especially in the doings of spooks. One of the most illustrious spookers of our time is Mr. William D. Howells, who introduces a well-credentialed reader to as respectable and mannerly a company of spooks as one could wish to meet. To the terror that invests the chairman of a district school board, the Howells ghost adds something of the mystery enveloping a farmer from another township. Story. Noun. A narrative, commonly untrue. The truth of the stories here following has, however, not been successfully impeached. One evening, Mr. Rudolph Block of New York found himself seated at dinner alongside Mr. Percival Pollard, the distinguished critic. "Mr. Pollard," said he, "my book, The biography of a dead cow is published anonymously, but you can hardly be ignorant of its authorship. Yet in reviewing it, you speak of it as the work of the idiot of the century. Do you think that fair criticism? Oh, I am very sorry, sir, replied the critic amiably, but it did not occur to me that you really might not wish the public to know who wrote it. Mr. W.C. Morrow, who used to live in San Jose, California, was addicted to writing ghost stories, which made the reader feel as if a stream of lizards, fresh from the ice, were streaking it up his back and hiding in his hair. San Jose was, at that time, believed to be haunted by the visible spirit of a noted bandit named Vasquez, who had been hanged there. The town was not very well lighted, and it is putting it mildly to say that San Jose was reluctant to be out of nights. One particularly dark night, two gentlemen were abroad in the loneliest spot within the city limits, talking loudly to keep up their courage, when they came upon Mr. J. Owen, a well-known journalist. "Why, Owen," said one, "what brings you here on such a night as this? You told me that this is one of Vasquez's favorite haunts, and you are a believer. Aren't you afraid to be out?" "Oh, my dear fellow," the journalist replied with a drear autumnal cadence in his speech, like the moan of a leaf-laden wind, "I am afraid to be in it. I have one of Will Morrow's stories in my pocket, and I don't dare to go where there is light enough to read it." Rear Admiral Schley and Representative Charles F. Joy were standing near the Peace Monument in Washington, discussing the question, is success a failure? Mr. Joy suddenly broke off in the middle of an eloquent sentence, exclaiming, "Hello! I've heard that band before. Sandlerman's, I think." "I don't hear any band," said Schley. "Oh, come to think, I don't either," said Joy. "But I see General Miles coming from down the avenue, and that pageant always affects me in the same way as a brass band. One has to scrutinize one's impressions pretty closely, or one will mistake their origin." While the Admiral was digesting this hasty meal of philosophy, General Miles passed in review, a spectacle of impressive dignity. When the tale of the seeming procession had passed, and the two observers had recovered from the transient blindness caused by his effulgence, "He seems to be enjoying himself," said the Admiral. "There is nothing," assented Joy thoughtfully, "that he enjoys one half so well." The illustrious statesman Champ Clark once lived about a mile from the village of Jibbeig, in Missouri. One day, he rode into town on a favorite mule, and, hitching the beast on the sunny side of a street, in front of a saloon, he went inside in his character of teetotaler, to apprise the barkeep that wine is a mocker. It was a dreadfully hot day. Pretty soon a neighbor came in, and seeing Clark, "Champ, it is not right to leave that mule out there in the sun. He'll roast, sure. He was smoking as I passed him." "Oh, he's all right," said Clark lightly. "He's an inveterate smoker." The neighbor took a lemonade, but shook his head and repeated that it was not right. He was a conspirator. There had been a fire the night before. A stable just around the corner had burned, and a number of horses had put on their immortality. Among them a young colt, which was roasted to a rich nut brown. Some of the boys had turned Mr. Clark's mule loose and substituted the mortal part of the colt. Presently, another man entered the saloon. "For mercy's sake," he said, taking it with sugar, "do remove that mule, barkeeper. It smells." "Oh, yes," interposed Clark. "That animal has the best nose in Missouri. But if he doesn't mind, you shouldn't." In the course of human events, Mr. Clark went out, and there apparently lay the incinerated and shrunken remains of his charger. The boys did not have any fun out of Mr. Clark, who looked at the body and, with the non-committal expression to which he owes so much of his political preferment, went away, But walking home late that night, he saw his mule, standing silent and solemn by the wayside in the misty moonlight, mentioning the name of Helen Blazes with uncommon emphasis. Mr. Clark took the back track as hard as ever he could hook it, and passed the night in town. General H.H. Wotherspoon, president of the Army War College, has a pet rib-nosed baboon, an animal of uncommon intelligence, but imperfectly beautiful. Returning to his apartment one evening, the general was surprised and pained to find Adam, for so the creature is named, the general being a Darwinian, sitting up for him and wearing his master's best uniform coat, epaulets and all. "You confounded remote ancestor," thundered the great strategist. "What do you mean by being out of bed after naps and with my coat on?" Adam rose and with a reproachful look got down on all fours in the manner of his kind and, scuffling across the room to a table, returned with a visiting card. General Barry had called, and, judging by an empty champagne bottle and several cigar stumps, had been hospitably entertained while waiting. The general apologized to his faithful progenitor and retired. The next day he met General Barry, who said, "Spoon, old man, when leaving you last evening, I forgot to ask you about those excellent cigars. Where did you get them?" General Wotherspoon did not deign to reply, but walked away. Pardon me, please," said Barry, moving after him. I was joking, of course. Why, I knew it was not you before I had been in the room 15 minutes. Success. Noun. The one unpardonable sin against one's fellows. In literature, and particularly in poetry, the elements of success are exceedingly simple, and are admirably set forth in the following lines by the Reverend Father Gasalaska Jape, entitled, for some mysterious reason, John A. Joyce. The bard who would prosper must carry a book, to his thinking in prose and wear a crimson cravat, for a faraway look and a head of hexameter hair. Be thin in your thought, and your body'll be fat. If you wear your hair long, you need your hat. Suffrage. Noun. An expression of opinion by means of a ballot. The right of suffrage, which is held to be both a privilege and a duty, means, as commonly interpreted, the right to vote for the man of another man's choice, and is highly prized. Refusal to do so has the bad name of incivism. The incivilian, however, cannot be properly arraigned for his crime, for there is no legitimate accuser. If the accuser is himself guilty, he has no standing in the court of opinion. If not, he profits by the crime. For A's abstention from voting gives greater weight to the vote of B. By female suffrage is meant the right of a woman to vote as some man tells her to. It is based on female responsibility, which is somewhat limited. The woman most eager to jump out of her petticoat to assert her rights is first to jump back into it, when threatened with a switching for misusing them. A reminder once more. Ambrose is not always necessarily the sage truth, and all of his opinions are his own, framed and formed in the natures of his time, this being before the advent of universal suffrage. And so, sometimes he's just a colossal git. Sycophant. Noun. One who approaches greatness on his belly, so that he may not be commanded to turn and be kicked. He is sometimes an editor. As the lean leech its victim found is pleased to fix itself upon a part diseased, till its black hide distended with bad blood, it drops to die of surfeit in the mud. So the base sycophant with joy descries his neighbour's weak spot, and his mouth applies, gorges and prospers like the leech, although, unlike that reptile, he will not let go. Galasma. If it paid you to devote your talent to the service of a goat, showing by forceful logic that its beard is more than errands fit to be revered, if to the task of honouring its smell, profit had prompted you, and love as well, the world would benefit at last by you, and wealthy malefactors weep anew, your favour for a moment's space denied, and to the nobler object turned aside. It's not enough that thrifty millionaires who loot in freight and spoliate in fairs are cursed with consciences that bid them fly to safer villainies of darker dye. Or swearing robbery and feign instead to steal, they call it cornering, our bread. May see you groveling their boots to lick, and begging for the favour of a kick. Still, must you follow to the bitter end your sycophantic disposition's trend, and in your eagerness to please the rich, must hunt hungry sinners to their final ditch. In Morgan's praise you smite the sounding wire, and sing hosannas to great Havemeyer. What's Satan done with that him you should eschew? He, too, is wreaking rich deducting you. Syllogism, noun. A logical formula consisting of a major and a minor assumption, and an inconsequent. See logic. Sylph, noun. An immaterial but visible being that inhabited the air when the air was an element, and before it was fatally polluted with factory smoke, sewer gas, and similar products of civilization. Sylphs were allied to gnomes, nymphs, and salamanders, which dwelt respectively in earth, water, and fire, now insalubrious. Sylphs, like fowls of the air, were male and female, to no purpose apparently, for if they had progeny they must have nested in inaccessible places, none of the chicks having ever been seen. Symbol, noun. Something that is supposed to typify or stand for something else. Many symbols are mere survivals. Things which, having no longer any utility, continue to exist because we have inherited the tendency to make them. As funeral urns carved on memorial monuments, they were once real urns holding the ashes of the dead. We cannot stop making them, but we can give them a name that conceals our helplessness. Symbolic, adjective, pertaining to symbols and the use and interpretation of symbols. They say 'tis conscience feels compunction. I hold that that's the stomach's function. For of the sinner I have noted that when he sinned he's somewhat bloated, or ill some other ghastly fashion, within that bowel of compassion. True, I believe that the only sinner is he that eats a shabby dinner. You know how Adam, with good reason for eating apples out of season, was cursed, but that is all symbolic. The truth is, Adam had the colic. GJ. Alright, we are in the middle of an ad break now, actually, so we will have to take a short break. I was really cutting it close there. But we needed to get through the letter S in all of its salacious length. So, let's go ahead and take a short break, top up our drinks, stretch our legs, attend to our fuzzy friends, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes with the letter T. All right, we are back. A short break whenever we tend to run right up until it starts, and that's fine by me. So, we got through the letter S, and there were some stingers in there for sure, as well as a couple stinkers. But we are approaching, well, we're toward the end of the alphabet, honestly. I think S is probably one of the most loaded letters. So we'll probably have quite a lot less to deal with as we go further on, but that doesn't mean to say that there won't be good entries. So let's continue tonight with the letter T. I'm sure this will be absolutely lovely. I see already things that, are still timely. The letter T. T, the 20th letter of the English alphabet, was by the Greeks absurdly called Tau. In the alphabet whence ours comes, it had the form of the rude corkscrew of the period, and when it stood alone, which was more than the Phoenicians could always do, signified Talangol, translated by the learned Dr. Brownrigg, Tanglefoot. Table d'hôte, noun, a caterer's thrifty concession to the universal passion for irresponsibility. Old Poncinello, freshly wed, took Madam P to table, and there deliriously fed, as fast as he was able. "I dote upon good grub," he cried, intent upon its throatage. "Ah, yes," said the neglected bride, "you're in your table d'hôtage." Associated Poets. Tail. Noun. The part of an animal's spine that has transcended its natural limitations to set up an independent existence in a world of its own. Excepting in its fetal state, man is without a tail, privation of which he attests in hereditary and uneasy consciousness by the coat-skirt of the male and the train of the female, and by a marked tendency to ornament that part of his attire where the tails should be, and indubitably once was. This tendency is most observable in the female of the species, in whom the ancestral sense is strong and persistent. The tailed men described by Lord Monboddo are now generally regarded as a product of an imagination unusually susceptible to influences generated in the golden age of our Pythican past. Take. Verb. Transitive. To acquire, frequently by force, but preferably by stealth. Clearly never knew a furry. Now, to be fair, fursuits in the early 1900s, which I assure you, there probably were, like, furries are indeed older than the internet. Don't let anyone else believe you. I mean, that's how they made them. But anyway, fursuits back then were A, probably prohibitively expensive, even more so than now, and B, they probably stank because I bet they were real fur. Just saying. So, they probably kept even more to themselves. Talk. Verb. Transitive. To commit an indiscretion without temptation, from an impulse without purpose. Tariff. Noun. A tax on consumers? No. A noun. A scale of taxes on imports, designed to protect the domestic producer against the greed of his consumer. The enemy of human souls sat grieving at the cost of coals, for hell had been annexed of late, and was a sovereign southern state. Yes.
It were no more than right, said he, that I should get my fuel free. The duty, neither just nor wise, compels me to economize, whereby my broilers, every one, are execrably underdone. What would they have done? What would they have? Although I yearn to do them nicely to a turn, I can't afford an honest heat. This tariff makes even devils cheat. I'm ruined, and my humble trade all rascals may at will invade. Beneath my nose the public press outdoes me in sulphurousness. The bar ingeniously applies to my undoing my own lies. My medicines the doctor use, albeit vainly, to refuse to me my fair and rightful prey, to keep their own in shape to pay. The preachers by example teach what scorning to perform I teach, that statesmen aping me all make more promises than they can break. Against such competition I lift up a disregarded cry, since all ignore my just complaint. By hokey pokey I'll turn saint. Now the Republicans, who all are saints, began at once to bawl against his competition, so there was a devil of a go. They locked horns with him tete-a-tete in acrimonious debate, till Democrats, forlorn and lone, had hopes of coming by their own. That evil to avert in haste, the two belligerents embraced. But since 'twere wicked to relax a little of the sacred tax, 'twas finally agreed to grant the bold insurgent Protestant a bounty on each soul that fell into his ineffectual hell. Adam Smith.
Note that this is before the great flip-floppeting of political leanings. Actually, probably just about as it's happening. Pretty timely. Because this is the devil saying, I'm going to be a Republican now. Of course, he was doing it to say that he was trying to be a saint, flip-flop, but things are fuzzy in the distant past. I say distant, it's barely 100 years. Technicality. Noun. In an English court, a man named Home was tried for slander in having accused his neighbor of murder. His exact words were, Sir Thomas Holt hath taken a cleaver and stricken his cook upon the head, so that one side of the head fell upon one shoulder and the other side upon the other shoulder. The defendant was acquitted by instruction of the court, the learned judges holding that the words did not charge murder, for they did not affirm the death of the cook, that being only an inference. Technicality indeed. Tedium. Noun. Ennui. The state or condition of one that is bored. Many fanciful derivations of the word have been affirmed, but so high an authority as Father Jape says that it comes from a very obvious source. The first words of the ancient Latin hymn, Te Deum Laudamus. In this apparently natural derivation, there is something that saddens. Exactly. That's a good way to put it. As a rule, the best of the past falls short of modern sensibilities. And actually, we should hope to someday be considered backwards. That means that society has continued its forward progress. We should only hope that after we can no longer keep up by virtue of being dead, we'll be thought backward. The best we can do while we're alive is to keep up with the Joneses, but let's just try not to step backward too far. Teetotaler. Noun. One who abstains from strong drink, sometimes totally, sometimes tolerably totally. I'll not have any teetotaling in my chat, thank you very much. I have my own drink to attend to. Telephone. Noun. An invention of the devil, which abrogates some of the advantages of making a disagreeable person keep his distance. Telescope. Noun. a device having a relation to the eye similar to that of the telephone to the ear, enabling distant objects to plague us with a multitude of needless details. Luckily, it is unprovided with a bell summoning us to the sacrifice. I rather like that. Of course, now we have video calls, so such the shame. Tenacity, noun. A certain quality of the human hand in its relation to the coin of the realm. It attains its highest development in the hand of authority, and is considered a serviceable equipment for a career in politics. The following illustrative lines were written of a Californian gentleman in high political preferment, who has passed to his accounting. Of such tenacity his grip that nothing from his hand can slip, well buttered eels you may o'erwhelm, in tubs of liquid slippery elm, in vain from his detaining pinch, they cannot struggle half an inch. 'Tis lucky that he so is planned, that breath he draws not with his hand, for if he did, so great his greed, he'd draw his last with eager speed. Nay, that were well, you say, not so, he'd draw, but never let it go. Theosophy, noun. An ancient faith having all the certitude of religion, and all the mystery of science. The modern theosophist holds with the Buddhists that we live an incalculable number of times on this earth, in as many several bodies, because one life is not long enough for our complete spiritual development. That is, a single lifetime does not suffice for us to become as wise and good as we choose to wish to become. To be absolutely wise and good, that is perfection, and the theosophist is so keen-sighted as to have observed that everything desirous of improvement eventually attains perfection, less competent observers are disposed to accept cats, which seem neither wiser nor better than they were last year. The greatest and fattest of recent theosophists was the late Madame Blavatsky, who had no cat. I'll have you know that my cats are better people than most people. Ha! Take that! Tithes, noun. An ablement of the stage designed to reinforce the general acclamation of the press agent with a particular publicity. Public attention was once somewhat diverted from this garment to Miss Lillian Russell's refusal to wear it, and many were the conjectures as to her motive. The guess of Miss Pauline Hall, showing a high order of ingenuity and sustained reflection. It was Miss Hall's belief that nature had not endowed Miss Russell with beautiful legs. This theory was impossible of acceptance by the male understanding, but the conception of a faulty female leg was of so prodigious originality as to rank above the most brilliant feats of philosophical speculation. It is strange that in all the controversy regarding Miss Russell's aversion to tights, no one seems to have thought to ascribe it to what was known among the ancients as modesty. The nature of that sentiment is now imperfectly understood, and possibly incapable of exposition with the vocabulary that remains to us. The study of lost arts has, however, been recently revived, and some of the arts themselves recovered. This is an epoch of renaissances, and there is ground for hope that the primitive blush may be dragged from its hiding place amongst the tombs of antiquity and hissed on the stage. Okay, that was actually kind of clever. Tomb, noun. The house of indifference. Tombs are now by common consent invested with a certain sanctity, but when they have been long tenanted, it is considered no sin to break them open and rifle them. The famous Egyptologist Dr. Huggins explaining that the tomb may be innocently gleaned as soon as its occupant is done smelling. The
the soul being then all exhaled. This reasonable view is now generally accepted by archaeologists, whereby the noble science of curiosity has been greatly dignified. Dr. Huggins must be British. Tope. Verb, to tipple, booze, swill, soak, guzzle, lush, bib, swig. In the individual, toping is regarded with a disesteem. But toping nations are in the forefront of civilization and power. When pitted against the hard-drinking Christians, the abstemious Mahometans go down like grass before the scythe. In India, 100,000 beef-eating and brandy and soda-guzzling Britons held in subjection 250 million vegetarian abstainers of the same Aryan race. With what an easy grace the whiskey-loving American pushed the temperate Spaniard out of his possessions. From the time when the berserkers ravaged all the coasts of Western Europe and lay drunk in every conquered port, it has been the same way everywhere. The nations that drink too much are observed to fight rather well, and not too righteously. Wherefore, the estimable old ladies who abolished the canteen from the American army may justly boast of having materially augmented the nation's military power. Okay, that one had me in and out on that one. In and out. Was a fan of that definition, and then other times not. Almost had me there, Ambrose. Almost. I was almost along the whole for the ride, but not quite. Tortoise. Noun. A creature thoughtfully created to supply occasion for the following lines by the illustrious Ambrose. To my pet tortoise. My friend, you are not graceful, not at all. Your gait's between a stagger and a sprawl. Nor are you beautiful. Your head's a snake's to look at, and I do not doubt it aches. As to your feet, they'd make an angel weep. 'Tis true you take them in whene'er you sleep. No, you're not pretty, but you have, I own, a certain firmness. Mostly your backbone. Firmness and strength, you have a giant's thews, are virtues that the great know how to use. I wish they did not, yet, on the whole, you lack, excuse me, my mentioning it, soul. So, to be candid, unreserved, and true, I'd rather you were I than I were you. Perhaps, however, in time to be, when man's extinct, a better world may see. Your progeny in power and control due to the genesis and growth of soul. So I salute you as a reptile grand, predestined to regenerate the land. Father of possibilities, oh, deign to accept the homage of a dying reign. In the far region of the unforeknown, I dream a tortoise upon every throne. I see an emperor his hand withdraw into his carapace for fear of law. A king who carries something else than fat. However acceptably he carries that. A president not strenuously bent on punishment of audible dissent. Who never shot, it were a vain attack, an armed or unarmed tortoise in the back. Subjected citizens that feel no need to make the march of mind a wild stampede, all progress slow, contemplative, sedate, and take your time, the word in church and state. O tortoise, 'tis a happy, happy dream, my glorious testudinous regime. I wish in Eden you'd brought this about by slouching in and chasing Adam out. Tree. Noun. A tall vegetable intended by nature to serve as a penal apparatus, although through a miscarriage of justice, most trees bear only negligible fruit, or none at all. When naturally fruited, the tree is a beneficent agency of civilization, and an important factor in public morals. In the stern West and the sensitive South, its fruit, white and black respectively, Jesus Christ, though not eaten, is agreeable to the public taste, and though not exported, profitable to the general welfare. That the legitimate relation of the tree to justice was no discovery of Judge Lynch, who indeed conceded it no primacy over the lamppost and the bridge girder, is made plain by the following passage from Morrister. who antedated him by 2 centuries. While in London, I was carried to see the go-go tree, whereof I had heard much talk, but saying yet I saw naught remarkable in it. Ye had men of ye village where it grew made answer as followeth. Ye tree is not now in fruit, but in his season you shall see bending for his branches all such as have affronted ye king his majesty. And I was further told ye word go-go signifieth in your tongue is the same as rapsco in our own travels in the east.
Yeah, wow, that was rather direct with that one. Woo-hoo-hoo! Yeah. Generally, in polite society, one generally, usually, typically, most often, leaves that sort of thing unsaid, Mr. Bierce. It's well known, but it's left unsaid. But I guess that is, we're reading satire and cynicism here, and this fits the bill to a T. Trial, noun. A formal inquiry designed to prove and put upon record the blameless characters of judges, advocates, and jurors. In order to effect this purpose, it is necessary to supply a contrast in the person of one who is called the defendant, the prisoner, or the accused. If the contrast is made sufficiently clear, this person is made to undergo such an affliction as will give the virtuous gentleman a comfortable sense of their immunity, added to that of their worth. In our day, the accused is usually a human being, or a socialist. But in medieval times, animals, fishes, reptiles, and insects were brought to trial. A beast that had taken human life or practiced sorcery was duly arrested, tried, and, if condemned, put to death by the public executioner. Insects ravaging grain fields, orchards, or vineyards were cited to appeal by counsel before a civil tribunal, and after testimony, argument, and condemnation, if they continued in contumacion, the matter was taken to a high ecclesiastical court, where they were solemnly excommunicated and anathematized. In a street of Toledo, some pigs that had wickedly run between the viceroy's legs, upsetting him, were arrested on a warrant, tried, and punished. In Naples, an ass was condemned to be burned at the stake, but the sentence appears not to have been executed. Diodosio relates from the court records many trials of pigs, bulls, horses, cocks, dogs, goats, etc., greatly, it is believed, to the betterment of their conduct and morals. In 1451, a suit was brought against the leeches infesting some ponds about Bern, and the Bishop of Lausanne, instructed by the faculty of Heidelberg University, directed that some of the aquatic worms be brought before the local magistracy. This was done, and the leeches, both present and absent, were ordered to leave the places that they had infested within 3 days on pain of incurring the malediction of God. In the voluminous records of this cause célèbre, nothing is found to show whether the offenders braved the punishment or departed forthwith out of that inhospitable jurisdiction. Trichinosis, noun. The pigs reply to proponents of porcophagy. Moses Mendelssohn, having fallen ill, sent for a Christian physician, who at once diagnosed the philosopher's disorder as trichinosis, but tactfully gave it another name. "You need an immediate change of diet," he said. "You must eat 6 ounces of pork every other day." "Pork?" shrieked the patient. "Pork? Nothing shall induce me to touch it." "Do you mean that?" The doctor gravely asked. "I swear it." "Good! Then I will undertake to cure you." Trinity, noun. In the multiplex theism of certain Christian churches, 3 entirely distinct deities consistent with only one. Subordinate deities of the polytheistic faith, such as devils and angels, are not dowered with the power of combination, and must urge individually their claims to adoration and propitiation. The Trinity is one of the most sublime mysteries of our holy religion. In rejecting it because it is incomprehensible, Unitarians betray their inadequate sense of theological fundamentals. In religion, we believe only what we do not understand, except in the instance of an intelligible doctrine that contradicts an incomprehensible one. In that case, we believe the former as a part of the latter. Okay, so that brings to mind, brings to discussion, brings to just clearing the air. Think of Gurren Lagann and the combination being the yeah, every way proving the Trinity's blood. But think of Gurren Lagann and the combination being the greatest, and those that are unable to combine, the lower robot suits and such, being below, beneath, lesser. Yeah, let that sink. Let that sink in. All right. This is extra blasphemous. And you know what? I'm here for it. I left the church many, many years ago. Blasphemy is my game. Troglodyte. Noun. Specifically a cave dweller of the Paleolithic period. After the tree and before the flats, a famous community of troglodytes dwelt with David in the cave of Adullam. The colony consisted of everyone that was in distress and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented. In brief, all the socialists of Judah. God damn it, Ambrose. I know that the start of the Red Scare and such all began around the early 1900s. But I enjoyed that. As someone who mostly identifies as like a democratic socialist, or close to it, you got me. You got me. Truce. Noun. Friendship. Truth. Noun. An ingenious compound of desirability and appearance. Discovery of truth is the sole purpose of philosophy, which is the most ancient occupation of the human mind, and has a fair prospect of existing with increasing activity to the end of time. Truthful. Adjective. Dumb and illiterate. I'm sure that through all of them, I'm rather certain that anarchy or anarchists had an entry somewhere, and there's been several other references there too. Trust. Noun. In American politics, a large corporation composed in greater part of thrifty working men, widows of small means, orphans in the care of guardians and the courts, with many similar malefactors and public enemies. Well, you said it was at the beginning, and the pieces, they connect so readily. They're like Legos. They're like Legos that you put together with an illegal build. Haha! Anarchy! Where was I? Derailed myself. Turkey. Noun. a large bird whose flesh, when eaten on certain religious anniversaries, has the peculiar property of attesting piety and gratitude. Incidentally, it is pretty good eating. It depends who's cooking. Turkey can be either fantastic or the driest piece of poultry you have ever encountered. It is really entirely up to the cook. Twice. Adjective. Once too often. Type. Noun. Pestilent bits of metal suspected of destroying civilization and enlightenment, despite their obvious agency in this incomparable dictionary. It's good that you're self-aware, Ambrose. Tsitsi, or tsitsi. Fly. Noun. An African insect, Glossina morsitans, whose bite is commonly regarded as nature's most efficacious remedy for insomnia, though some patients prefer that of the American novelist, Mendax Interminabilis. God damn it, Ambrose. Okay, so, for context, the tsetse fly, its bite transmits sleeping disease, which is terminal. But it's a cure for insomnia, I guess. Some of these are just downright dark. Alright, let's continue with the letter U. Ubiquity. Noun. The gift or power of being in all places at one time. But not in all places at all times, which is omnipresence, an attribute of God, and the luminiferous ether only. The important distinction between ubiquity and omnipresence was not clear to the medieval church, and there was much bloodshed about it. Certain Lutherans who affirmed the presence everywhere of Christ's body were known as the ubiquitarians. For this error they were doubtless damned. For Christ's body is present only in the Eucharist, though that sacrament may be performed in more than one place simultaneously. In recent times, ubiquity has not always been understood, not even by Sir Boyle Roche, for example, who held that a man cannot be in two places at once, unless he's a bird. Yeah, exactly. It works the same way. Ugliness. Noun. A gift of the gods to certain women, entailing virtue without humility. Ambrose. I mean, ultimatum. Noun. In diplomacy, a last demand before resorting to concessions. Having received an ultimatum from Austria, the Turkish ministry met to consider it. "O servant of the Prophet," said the Sheikh of the Imperial Shabuk of the Mamouche of the Invincible Army, "how many unconquerable soldiers have we in arms?" "Upholder of the faith," that dignitary replied after examining his memoranda, "they are in numbers as the leaves of the forest." "And how many impenetrable battleships? Strike terror to the hearts of all Christian swine," he asked of the Imam of the ever-victorious navy. "Uncle of the full moon," was the reply, "deign to know that they are as the waves of the ocean, the sands of the desert, and the stars of heaven." For 8 hours, the broad brow of the Sheik of the Imperial Tribuk was corrugated with evidences of deep thought. He was calculating the chances of war. Then, "Sons of angels," he said, "the die is cast. I shall suggest to the ulema of the imperial ear that he advise inaction, and in the name of Allah, the council is adjourned." Un-American. Adjective. Wicked, intolerable, heathenish. Unction. Noun. An oiling or greasing. The rite of extreme unction consists in touching with oil consecrated by a bishop several parts of the body of one engaged in dyeing. Marbury relates that after the rite had been administered to a certain wicked English nobleman, it was discovered that the oil had not been properly consecrated, and no other could be obtained. When informed of this, the sick man said in anger, "Then I'll be damned if I die." "My son," said the priest, "that is what we fear." Clever. Clever. I like that. Understanding. Noun. A cerebral secretion that enables one having it to know a house from a horse by the roof on the house. Its nature and laws have been exhaustively expounded by Locke, who wrote A House, and Kant, who lived in a horse. His understanding was so keen that all things which he'd felt, heard, seen, he could interpret without fail. If he was in or out of jail, he wrote at inspiration's call deep disquisitions on them all. Then, pent at last in an asylum, performed the service to compile 'em. So great a writer all men swore they never had not read before. Yorick Wormley. Unitarian. Noun. One who denies the trinity of a Trinitarian, or the divinity of a Trinitarian. Universalist. Noun. One who foregoes the advantage of a hell for persons of another faith. Urbanity. Noun. The kind of civility that urban observers ascribe to dwellers in all cities but New York. Its commonest expression is heard in the words, "I beg your pardon," and it is not inconsistent with disregard of the rights of others. The owner of the powder mill was musing on a distant hill, when something his mind foreboded, when from the cloudless sky there fell a deviled human kidney. Well, the man's mill had exploded. His hat he lifted from his head. "I beg your pardon, sir," he said. "I didn't know 'twas loaded." Swatkin. Usage. Noun. The first person of the literary trinity. The second and third being custom and conventionality. Imbued with a decent reverence for this holy triad, an industrious writer may hope to produce books that will live as long as the fashion. Uxoriousness. Noun. A perverted affection that has strayed to one's own wife. As we're getting to the end, the letters are coming very quickly and very briefly, as might be expected. The letter V. Valor. Noun. A soldierly compound of vanity, duty, and the gambler's hope. "Why have you halted?" roared the commander of a division at Chickamauga, who had ordered a charge. "Move forward, sir, at once!" General," said the commander of the delinquent brigade, "I am persuaded that any further display of valor by my troops will bring them into collision with the enemy." Vanity. Noun. The tribute of a fool to the worth of the nearest ass. They say that hens do cackle loudest when there's nothing vital in the eggs they've laid. And there are hens, professing to have made a study of mankind, who say that
Men, whose business 'tis to drive the tongue or pen, make the most clamorous fanfaronade, or their most worthless work. And I'm afraid they're not entirely different from the hen. Lo, the drum major in his coat of gold, his blazing breeches, and his high-towering cap, imperiously pompous, grandly bold, grim, resolute, and awe-inspiring chap. Who'd think this gorgeous creature's only virtue is that in battle he will never hurt you? Hannibal Hunsaker. Virtues. Noun. Plural. Certain abstentions. Vituperation. Noun. Satire, as understood by dunces, and all such as suffer from an impediment to their wit. Vote. Noun. The instrument and symbol of a freeman's power to make a fool of himself and a wreck of his country. That's particularly pessimistic. Probably not too far from accurate, but pessimistic all the same. Oh, we got 5 pages of W's. The letter W. W has, of all the letters in our alphabet, the only cumbrous name. The names of the others being monosyllabic. This advantage of the Roman alphabet over the Grecian is the more valued over audibly spelling out some simple Greek word, like epixoriambikos. Still, it is now thought by the learned that other agencies than the difference of the two alphabets may have been concerned in the decline of the glory that was Greece, and the rise of the grandeur that was Rome. There can be no doubt, however, that by simplifying the name of W, calling it Wow, for example, our civilization could be, if not promoted, at least better endured. Well, there is something to that. The existence of W, and the absolute failure that it represents in all things even approaching abbreviations, is a crime against civility, culture, society, and humanity at large. Wall Street. Noun. A symbol of sin for every devil to rebuke. That Wall Street is a den of thieves is a belief that serves every unsuccessful thief in place of a hope in heaven. Even the great and good Andrew Carnegie has made his profession of faith in the matter. Carnegie, the dauntless, has uttered his call to battle. The brokers are parasites all! Carnegie, you'll never prevail. Keep the wind of your slogan to belly your sail. Go back to your isle of perpetual broom. Silence your pibroch. Doff your tartan and plume. Ben Lamond is calling his son from the fray. Fly from the region of Wall Street away! While still you're possessed of a single bawbee, I wish it were pledged to endowment of me. 'Twere wise to retreat from the wars of finance, lest its value decline ere your credit advance. For a man twixt a king of finance and the sea, Carnegie, your tongue is too free. Anonymous Bink. A note. This was written before the Great Depression, so before the great crash of Wall Street. A little prescient, maybe. Or maybe just the fact that everyone knew that financiers are in fact the worst. And the capitalists and venture capitalists are in fact what is going to be the end of civilization as we know it. But in the end, they created so much so much value for the shareholders. Think of the shareholders. War. Noun. A byproduct of the arts of peace. The most menacing political condition is a period of international amity. The student of history who has not been taught to expect the unexpected may justly boast himself inaccessible to the light. In time of peace, prepare for war, has a deeper meaning than is commonly discerned. It means not merely that all things earthly have an end, that change is the one immutable and eternal law, but that the soil of peace is thickly sown with the seeds of war and singularity suited to their germination and growth. It was when Kublai Khan had decreed his stately pleasure dome, when, that is to say, there were peace and fat feasting in Xanadu, said he, heard from afar ancestral voices prophesying war. One of the greatest poets, Coleridge, was one of the wisest of men, and it was not for nothing that he read us this parable. Let us have less of hand across the sea, and a little more of that elemental distrust that is the security of nations. War loves to come like a thief in the night. Professions of eternal amity provide the night. See, Ambrose, I'm going to have to stop you there. It's not professions of peace and amity that bring the night of war. No. It's orange idiots. Mango buffoons. Among other things. But those are the most recent that come to mind. And yes, it is, if it hasn't caught on yet, my own sarcasm is as thick as Ambrose's here tonight. I'm in rare form and feeling all sorts of spicy, apparently. Washingtonian. Noun. A Potomac tribesman who exchanged the privilege of governing himself for the advantage of good government. In justice to him, it should be said that he did not want to. They took away his vote and gave instead the right when he had earned to eat his bread. In vain he clamors for his boss, poor soul, to come again and part him from his role. Offenbach Stutz. DC should be a state. The end. Weaknesses. Noun. Plural. Certain primal powers of tyrant woman wherewith she holds dominion over the male of her species, binding him to the service of her will and paralyzing his rebellious energies. Weather. Noun. The climate of the hour. A permanent topic of conversation among persons whom it does not interest, but who have inherited the tendency to chatter about it from naked arboreal ancestors whom it keenly concerned. The setting up official weather bureaus and their maintenance in mendacity prove that even governments are accessible to suasion by the rude forefathers of the jungle. Once I dipped into the future far as human eye could see, and I saw the chief forecaster, dead as anyone can be. Dead and damned and shut in Hades as a liar from his birth, with a record of unreason seldom paralleled on earth. While I looked, he reared him solemnly, that incandescent youth, from the coals that he'd preferred to the advantages of truth. He cast his eyes about him and above him, then he wrote on a slab of thin asbestos, what I venture here to quote, for I read it in the rose light of the everlasting glow. Cloudy, variable wind, with local showers, cooler snow. Yeah, there's a lot of that, and that's a very good term for it. That is absolutely a good term for it. That's also why, one of the reasons that Puerto Rico is similarly not considered eligible for statehood. Altogether, too much of a certain compound. Oh boy. Modern colonialism. Did I say Puerto Rico or did I say Cuba? I swear I said Puerto Rico. How much of the sake have I had tonight? One of those Tuesdays. Well, what shall we say? Just one of those Tuesdays. Wedding. Noun. A ceremony at which two persons undertake to become one. Okay, I did. Cool. So I didn't just... woo! Woo! Wedding. Noun. A ceremony at which two persons undertake to become one. One undertakes to become nothing, and nothing undertakes to become supportable. Ambrose, I know your thoughts are your thoughts on marriage and the institution thereof, but my man, werewolf. Noun. A wolf that was once or is sometimes a man. All werewolves are of evil disposition, having assumed a bestial form to gratify a bestial appetite. But some, transformed by sorcery, are as humane as is consistent with an acquired taste for human flesh. Some Bavarian peasants, having caught a wolf one evening, tied it to a post by the tail and went to bed. The next morning, nothing was there. Greatly perplexed, they consulted the local priest, who told them that their captive was undoubtedly a werewolf, and had resumed its human form during the night. The next time you take a wolf, the good man said, see that you chain it by the leg, and in the morning you will find a Lutheran. The absolute shade that the Catholics throw on the Protestants of the various flavors, even the Lutherans, who are as close to Catholic as it gets, is absurd and greatly amusing. Excuse me, what is this word? Ambrose, what? What are you doing to me? Wang de Putanawa. Noun. In the Ojibwa tongue, disaster. An unexpected affliction that strikes hard. Shouldn't you ask me whence this laughter, whence this audible big smiling, with its labial extension, with its maxillar distortion, and its diaphragmatic rhythmus, like the billowing of an ocean, like the shaking of a carpet? I should answer, I should tell you, from the great deeps of the spirit, from the unplummeted abysmus of the soul, this laughter welleth, as the fountain of the guggle, like the river of the Carron, to entoken and give warning that my present mood is sunny. Should you ask me further question, why the great deeps of the spirit, why the unplummeted abysmus of the soul extrudes this laughter? Why, this all audible big smiling, I should answer, I should tell you, with a white heart, tumpty, with a true tongue, honest Injun William Bryan, he has caught it. Caught the Wang de Putanawa. Ist the sandhill crane, the shankank, standing in the marsh, the neat deep, standing silent in the knee deep, with his wing tips crossed behind him, and his neck close reefed before him, with his bill, his William buried in the dawn upon his bosom, with his head retracted inly, with his shoulders overlook it? Does the sandhill crane, the shank-tank, shiver greyly in the north wind, wishing he had died when little as the sparrow the chip-chip does? No, 'tis not the shankank standing in the grey and dismal marsh, the grey and dismal knee-deep. No, 'tis peerless William Bryan, realizing that he's caught it. Caught the Wang de Putanawa. This whole definition and poem was just a personal attack from 100 and some years in the past. You knew what you were doing. You knew that someone would read this aloud someday, Ambrose Bierce. You may not have known what the internet was, but you knew. You knew. You bastard. Wheat. Noun. A cereal from which a tolerably good whiskey can with some difficulty be made, and which is also used for bread. The French said to eat more bread per capita of population than any other people, which is natural, for only they know how to make the stuff palatable. Okay, so I take back some of my distaste. You did mention that wheat is for whiskey before bread. I'm okay with this. White, adjective, and noun, black. Widow, noun, a pathetic figure that the Christian world has agreed to take humorously, although Christ's tenderness towards widows was one of the most marked features of his character. That is a rather stark pointing out that modern Christians are anything but Christ-like. Wine, noun, fermented grape juice known to the Women's Christian Union as liquor, sometimes as rum. Wine, madame, is God's next best gift to man. Wit, noun, the salt with which the American humorist spoils his intellectual cookery by leaving it out. Witch, noun, the first. 1. Any ugly and repulsive old woman in a wicked league with the devil. 2. A beautiful and attractive young woman in wickedness a league beyond the devil. Witticism, noun, a sharp and clever remark, usually quoted and seldom noted. What the Philistine is pleased to call a joke. Woman, noun, an animal usually living in the vicinity of man and having a rudimentary susceptibility to domestication. It is credited by many of the elder zoologists with a certain vestigial docility, acquired in a former state of seclusion, but naturalists of the post-Susan Anthony period. Susan P. Anthony, mind you. Having no knowledge of the seclusion, deny the virtue and declare that such as creation's dawn beheld, it roareth now. The species is the most widely distributed of all beasts of prey, infesting all habitable parts of the globe, from Greenland's spicy mountains to India's moral strand. The popular name, wolfman, is incorrect. The creature is of the cat kind. The woman is lithe and graceful in its movement, especially the American variety, Felis pugnans, is omnivorous and can be taught not to talk. Balthazar Pober. All right. Ambrose, with your fake quotations and poems. I see you. I see you. Worm's meat. Noun. The finished product of which we are the raw material. The contents of the Taj Mahal, the Tombeau Napoleon, and the Granitarium worm's meat is usually outlasted by the structure that houses it. But this too must pass away. Probably the silliest work in which a human being can engage is construction of a tomb for himself. The solemn purpose cannot dignify, but only accentuates by contrast the foreknown futility. Ambitious fool, so mad to be a show! How profitless the labor you bestow upon a dwelling whose magnificence the tenant neither can admire nor know. Build deep, build high, build massive as you can. The wanton grassroots will defeat the plan. By shouldering asunder all the stones in what to you would be a moment's span. Time to the dead, so all unreckoned flies, that when your marble is all dust, arise. If we can stretch your limbs and yawn, you'll think you scarcely can have closed your eyes. What, though of all man's work your tomb alone should stand till time himself be overthrown? Would it advantage you to dwell therein forever as a stain upon a stone? Joel Huck. Worship, Noun. Homo creator's testimony to the sound construction and fine finish of Deus Creatus. A popular form of objection, having an element of pride. Wrath. Noun. Anger of a superior quality and degree, appropriate to exalted characters and momentous occasions, as the wrath of God, the day of wrath, etc. Amongst the ancients, the wrath of kings was deemed sacred, for it could usually command the agency of some god for its fit manifestation, as could also that of a priest. The Greeks before Troy were so harried by Apollo that they jumped out of the frying pan of the wrath of Chryses into the fire of the wrath of Achilles. Though Agamemnon, the sole offender, was neither fried nor roasted. A similar noted immunity was that of David, when he incurred the wrath of Yahweh by numbering his people, 70,000 of whom paid the penalty with their lives. God is now love, and a director of the census performs his work without apprehension of disaster. All right, that brings us to the end of the letter W. We have very little left to go. We're probably just going to run long and finish, but for now, we've got an ad starting soon. I ran out of delays there. So, the ads are about to fire off, so let's take a short break. We'll be back in just a few minutes, where we'll continue and probably press on, because we only have 3 letters left, and realistically, at least 2 of them probably won't have a whole lot. All right, be back in a bit. Thanks, guys. All right, we are back.
And as I had mentioned, we only have just a few pages left, so we're going to be running a little over tonight. Because, you know what? I think it is just about time. It might be the first time, short of when we're reading short stories for the holidays, that we'll have finished 2 books in 2 sessions. Well, actually, no, I think when we finished Lord of the Rings, we finished our classic around the same time. So I stand corrected. Anyway, we should be finishing this pretty quickly because there's not nearly enough to fill another session. So we're going to be running just a tiny bit over, as if we weren't already about 10 minutes over, to finish the Devil's Dictionary. Leave it to the temptation of the devil himself to run late. Alright, the letter X. X, in our alphabet, being a needless letter, has an added invincibility to the attacks of the spelling reformers, and, like them, will doubtless last as long as the language. X is the sacred symbol of $10, and is, in such words as Xmas, XN, etc., stands for Christ, not, as is popularly supposed, because it represents a cross, but because the corresponding letter in the Greek alphabet is the initial of his name, Christos. If it represented a cross, it would stand for St. Andrew, who testified upon one of that shape. In the algebra of psychology, X stands for woman's mind. Words beginning with X are Grecian, and will not be defined in this standard English dictionary. Yep. X won't give it indeed. Y. Yankee. Noun. In Europe, an American. In the northern states of the Union, a New Englander. In the southern states, the word is unknown. See damn Yank. Year. Noun. A period of 365 disappointments. Damn. All right. Yesterday. Noun. The infancy of youth. The youth of mankind. The entire past of age. But yesterday I should have thought me blessed to stand high-pinnacled upon the peak of middle life and look down the bleak and unfamiliar foreslope to the west, where solemn shadows all the land invest, and stilly voices half-remembered speak unfinished prophecy, the wit and witch fires freak the haunted twilight of the dark of rest. Yea, yesterday my soul was all aflame to stay the shadow on the dial's face at manhood's noon mark. Now, in God his name, I chide aloud the little into space, disparting me from certitude, and fain would know the dream and vision ne'er again. Baruch Arnegrif. It is said that in his last illness, the poet Arnegrif was attended at different times by 7 doctors. Yoke. Noun. An implement, madam, to whose Latin name, jugum, we owe one of the most illuminating words in our language. A word that defines the matrimonial situation with precision, point, and poignancy. 1,000 apologies for withholding it. Again, with digs on marriage. Ambrose, man, you had to have been either a dedicated bachelor or one of the world's most well-documented incels. I'm leaning toward the latter at this point. Youth. Noun. The period of possibility. When Archimedes finds a fulcrum, Cassandra has a following, and 7 cities compete for the honor of endowing a living Homer. Youth
is the true Saturnian reign, the golden age on earth again, when figs are grown on thistles, and pigs betailed with whistles, and wearing silken bristles, live ever in clover, and cows fly over, delivering milk in every door, and justice never is heard to snore, and every assassin is made ghost, and howling is cast into Baltimost. Yeah, Polydor Smith. Yeah, as we're coming to a conclusion of this, while I appreciate the witticisms and the representation of satire and cynicism throughout the ages, as a person, some of Ambrose's ideas are just straight up abhorrent. So, probably would not care to spend life in close proximity. Maybe a pen pal at the very worst. The letter Z. Zany. Noun. A popular character in old Italian plays, who imitated with ludicrous incompetence the buffoon or clown, and was therefore the ape of an ape. For the clown himself has imitated the serious characters of the play. The zany was progenitor to the specialist in humor. As we today have the unhappiness to know him. In the zany we see an example of creation. In the humorist, of transmission. Another excellent specimen of the modern zany is the curate, who apes the actor, who apes the bishop, who apes the archbishop, who apes the devil. Zanzibari. Noun. An inhabitant of the Sultanate of Zanzibar, off the eastern coast of Africa. The Zanzibaris, a warlike people, are best known in this country through a threatening diplomatic incident that occurred a few years ago. The American consul at the capital occupied a dwelling that faced the sea, with a sandy beach between. Greatly to the scandal of this official's family, and against repeated remonstrances of the official himself, the people of the city persisted in using the beach for bathing. One day, a woman came down to the edge of the water and was stooping to remove her attire, a pair of sandals, when the consul, incensed beyond restraint, fired a charge of birdshot into the most conspicuous part of her person. Unfortunately for the existing entente cordiale between the two great nations, she was the sultana. Okay, so it's good to know that, Dick Cheney wasn't doing anything brand new. Firing birdshot into political opposites is a tale as old as time. Zeal. Noun. A certain nervous disorder afflicting the young and inexperienced. A passion that goeth before a sprawl. Oh, I like that. When Zeal sought gratitude for his reward, he went away exclaiming, "Oh, my lord! What do you want?" the lord asked, bending down. "An ointment for my cracked and bleeding crown." Jumkupel. Zenith. Noun. The point in the heavens directly overhead to a man standing or a growing cabbage. A noun in bed or a cabbage in the pot is not considered as having a zenith, though, from this view of the matter, there was one day considerable dissent among the learned, some holding that the posture of the body was immaterial. These were called horizontalists, their opponents verticalists. The horizontalist heresy was finally extinguished by Xenobus, the philosopher king of Abara, a zealous verticalist. Entering an assembly of philosophers who were debating the matter, he cast a severed human head at the feet of his opponents and asked them to determine its zenith, explaining that its body was hanging by the heels outside. Observing that it was the head of their leader, the horizontalists hastened to profess themselves converted to whatever opinion the crown might be pleased to hold, and horizontalism took its place among fides defuncti.
Zeus. Noun. The chief of Grecian gods, adored by the Romans as Jupiter, and by the modern Americans as God, Golb, Mob, and Dog. Some explorers who have touched upon the shores of America, and one who professes to have penetrated a considerable distance to the interior, have thought that these four names stand for as many distinct deities. But in his monumental work on surviving faiths, Frump insists that the natives are monotheists, each having no other god than himself, whom he worships under many sacred names. Zigzag. Verb. Transitive. To move forward uncertainly, from side to side, as one carrying the white man's burden. From Z, Z, and Jag, an Icelandic word of unknown meaning. He zigzagged so uncommon wide that none could pass on either side. So, to come softly through, I been constrained for dodge between. Moonwheel. We're gonna pass over the spurious and probably just intentionally infuriating usage of white man's burden. That is not something that we are even going to pretend to touch on. Moving on. Just leave it in the past, where it belongs. Zoology. Noun. The science and history of the animal kingdom, including its king, the housefly, Musca maledicta. The father of zoology was Aristotle, as is universally conceded, but the name of its mother has not come down to us. Two of the science's most illustrious expounders were Buffon and Oliver Goldsmith, from both of whom we learn the Histoire Générale des Animaux and a history of animated nature, that the domestic cow sheds its horn every 2 years. All right, and on that inconspicuous ending, the last definition in our Devil's Dictionary, zoology, we come to the end of our very generally entertaining filler book. Let's go ahead and shift out of our reading nook here. So, with all its problems, and once again a reminder that all of these things, books, etc., are a product of their times and the views espoused therein generally. We can hope we've moved past. Despite that, with a little bit of historical context and a little bit of liberal thought application, we can still take good lessons from these. In that, it's pretty much always sucked. People suck. Society sucks. So, take the chance. Don't be too serious. Poke fun at authority. Thumb your nose at those in power and say, fuck off. They were too modest back then for such crass language. Alright, guys. This will be where we wrap up for tonight. As for what we're doing for the remainder of the week, I think there's a possibility that we might start late next week, or start late on Friday. Since we're at an in-between point on our books, we might be doing something different, something special on Friday, but we might be starting around closer to 9 than 8. I'll be sure to update with the post on Bluesky and go about from there. But keep an eye out for that. I'm looking into the possibility of, if you recall, our friends who do Fanfic Fridays, they're they've generously have opened an invitation when we should be able to fit in. And wouldn't you know it, we're between books. So we could be reading something entirely silly and altogether scandalous, which is a lot of fun, isn't it? So this might be our very first collab stream, and I'm looking forward to it if we're able to make it work out. So we'll see. We'll see. If not, I'll come up with something to read and we'll start at our normal time. I'll be sure to update everyone and we'll go from there. All right. So this has been the end of Ambrose Bierce's The Devil's Dictionary. We did it. We are free from detention. We have gotten through and read the entire dictionary. Never mind that it is mostly abridged. So, I had fun with this, honestly. Despite all its problems, and despite Ambrose's personal failings, it was a nice shift, and has been useful in bouncing between different things, and generally, a nice reminder not to take things too seriously. We'll have to find something else to fill our in-between points, because I rather liked having something to fall back on like this. Yeah, overall, reasonably amusing. There were some failings, there were some annoyances, but with our own opportunity to take things at something less than serious, I think it worked out pretty well. Some meta cynicism, meta general humor is sometimes just what the doctor ordered. So, as always, thank you very much for joining us tonight. We will be back on Friday, whether that be at 8 o'clock with our normally scheduled reading, or at 9 o'clock with something fresh and interesting. Fresh and fantastical. We'll see. I'll keep you updated. Until then, thanks very much for joining us. Now, let's see if there's anyone that is reading tonight that we can raid into and spread the fun across. So, same category. Who have we got? Let's see, someone is reading Aragon. Exactly. Sometimes the absurd is the only refuge from the horrors of today. And there are plenty of horrors to go around. So, sometimes we just do what we can. Let's see. This person is reading something, I think. I do not speak Spanish, but it looks like she's reading. Let's see. This person is reading fan stories. Let's see. Snooze Button is reading again. We go to her relatively regularly. So let's see if we can find somebody new. Oh, you know what? This might work. This guy is reading One Piece, actually. I will say I am something of a fan. Let's see, this person is reading a book, then game. That's very clear. Writing gay pirate smut for pride. I see you, Fizzlewits. I see you. But we go for readers, not writers. I'm sorry. Let's see. Reading hour at the Lantern Archives, but she's been reading for 3 hours. I rather think that she might be done. Well, let's see, actually. Let me take a gander. Yeah, I'm gonna say she's probably not reading right now. I'm not seeing any action there. Yeah, I will absolutely give you a pass for not wanting to dive into it. I've been reading it for about 15 years, and so even when I started, it was a significant commitment to get caught up. I couldn't even imagine starting now. There's something over 1,000 chapters. That's wild. I could never wish it upon anyone to start watching the anime for it. Good Lord. There's just so very much. It's good, don't get me wrong, but all right, where were we? Let's go to the person reading fan story, or reader stories. That's a nice switch every once in a while. I don't think I've raided into this person before, but I've followed or raid along into them, so they are familiar at least. So we're going to be going over to Cryptid Roots tonight. I hope you give them our very best and enjoy as they're reading viewer stories. It's seemingly spooky. I'm not sure. We'll find out. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Bye now.
We're all nice to each other, which is so important. Sometimes there are writing communities that are active. This isn't every active community. It's just something I noticed. There are active writing communities, but sometimes a lot of those other active communities are full of people not. Just looking to tear other people. There is a group of critique and writing partners who don't want to help other people get better at the craft. They just want to tear other people down to make themselves feel better. And the internet, I know there are internet trolls all over, but there are certain writing communities that are full of those particular type of internet trolls, just looking to tear people down, saying everything's horrible, not give any useful advice. And I'm really happy out of my little community to encourage for genuinely finding improvement and surviving, and then also being like improving. Before